There you go.
Yep. All right, listeners. Well, I have a special treat for you. I actually had a lot of requests for this video. A lot of people have been asking about IEB, Inspector Empire Builder, and I have some of the powers that be, or the top people of IEB here with us this afternoon, or well, this morning, but I don't know when you guys will be listening to it. I have Rob and Michelle Hopkins.
Hi,
and I have Dirk Van Reenen. Did I get that right, Dirk?
Yeah, you nailed it. Thanks, Preston.
Awesome. And we will get into IEB and all that sort of stuff. But first, for all the listeners out there, I maybe it's just my mind, but I want to set the table and know everybody's background and kind of all that and where everybody's coming from. So I'll start with Rob and Michelle Hopkins. Assume that you're talking to somebody who's never met you. Introduce yourselves, who you are, and all that sort of stuff, and then we'll go to Dirk.
Okay. I'm Rob Hopkins. It's my wife, Michelle, and we've been in the home inspection business since 1986.
Well, he has. I was still in high school.
She loves to say that. And, you know, one of the things I realized about 10, 12 years ago is what happens to my business and my family and my wife and my kids and my house if I were to fall off a roof or have a heart attack or something like that. And we have 5 children, and I didn't want to leave them high and dry. So about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we made a conscious effort to grow our business. From just a one-man operation like most of the industry to see what we could do with it. And in that 10 years, through help of coaching in a number of places, we've managed to grow our business more than from like 100,000 a year to over 3 million in revenue. And you know, the last couple of years have been in particular very impactful in terms of learning how to run our business even at a higher level and increasing our profit margins considerably. So, you know, we always thought that if we just did a better inspection, things would happen and business would grow. And the reality is you need to run your business like a professional, like a business. And it really doesn't matter if it's home inspections or selling eggs or driving a truck or whatever it is. Business is business. And if you do it right, you can succeed.
Awesome. And tell us again, you may have said it, what's your area for the listeners?
We are in the Washington, D.C. market. We operate out of Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland suburbs of Washington. Occasionally, if you twist our arm real hard, we might drive all the way to Baltimore or Annapolis, but we try to stay within about a 20, 30-mile radius of Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Does the boss have does Michelle have anything to add?
No, he did a pretty good job. You know, further on, I'll put in some stuff about how our business has changed over the years.
Cool. All right, now let's move to Dirk and setting the table here. Dirk, tell us a little bit about you, and hopefully we'll tie it all together, how these 3 paths, including myself, have sort of crossed and intersected. So Dirk, tell us a little bit about your background.
So I was born and raised in South Africa, and when I was 14 years old, my family immigrated to the United States. Moved to a really small town in West Texas, and went to school at West Texas A&M. But from a young age, I was always drawn to business. So at the age of 21, I had my first business, which is a ski and snowboard business. And from there, just really loved all the aspects of businesses. And from there, owned several other businesses, bought some, sold some failed miserably. And kind of through the course of life, I got into real estate and started selling real estate. Also had an auction company where we auctioned off real estate. So from about 2008, I actually started getting really active in the real estate world. And obviously that's when everything was down crashing, but we were doing real estate auctions. And so that's when really we started seeing more of a rise in the business that we're doing. And a couple of years later, joined Keller Williams Realty, and really started kind of seeing some models for, you know, growing businesses. And was able to really increase our business dramatically over about a 3-year period and actually expand our business into multiple cities. And then I had an opportunity to go into leadership with Keller Williams. I was able to run one of their offices in Houston. Got relocated after that up to really close to where Rob and Michelle were. We didn't actually know each other at the time or really interact, but I was running a big real estate office for Keller Williams in Columbia, Maryland. And after a little while, I think I really wanted to go kind of back to that real small business feel. And that's what I realized that where my passion is, what I really love doing. So I kind of walked away from everything in the Keller Williams world and started a company called Bergflow, which is a training consulting company. We primarily work with small businesses, right? So most of the companies we work with are going to be probably anywhere from, a team of 10 on small side to maybe about a team of 100 on the larger side. And we specialize in working with service-based companies and helping them grow and scale. Right. So interesting enough, like the home inspection industry was never on our radar. I mean, but one of my first clients was a gentleman named Greg Bryan here in Houston, Texas. And I started working with Greg, and he hired me. He already had one of the largest and fastest growing inspection companies in Texas, but he really had some bigger plans and wanted to expand into multiple cities. So he hired me, and we started working together. And after about 4 months, he said, "Dirk, there is nothing like this in the inspection industry. Like, nobody's having this type of conversation. This needs to be happening in the inspection industry." And at that point, I didn't think really, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know that this is something I want to get into. And I said, hey, let's do this. Like, let's fly some companies to Houston and let me talk to them and get their perspective of it. So we probably had about 10 companies that flew in from around the country. Most companies were $1 million plus companies, and we started just asking questions, right? So as a consultant, you really understand how to start asking the kind of questions that are really going to help you understand kind of, how things are playing out and how the economics are playing out and how the organization is forming and developing. And we started seeing that there were some major gaps in the inspection industry. And, we started seeing companies that were $1 million companies, $2 million companies, and the owners were massively stressed out, and they were under a lot of financial pressure, right? And we were looking at the P&Ls, and we saw that, man, like, people are not making money, right? I mean, we had $2 million companies that were doing like 3, 4, 5%, in profit. And, some of the ones that were thought they were doing good were hitting like 10% in profit, and we started looking at this and just said, oh my gosh, man, like, there's a huge opportunity here to really help home inspection companies really transform the way that they do business, right? So I told Greg, I said, okay, hey, I'm in. And we launched IEB, and that was about 2 years ago. And really, that's where Rob and Michelle, I think, came to our first training. And that's, kind of where we kind of started meeting. And, I think, Preston, you were maybe at the second or third one. I can't remember when, and we met you. So that's kind of, I think, where we kind of all got connected is through that opportunity.
Absolutely. And I want to just add, I mean, people who listen to the podcast kind of know my background, but I just wanted to add how I interact with these. I know these folks. I was in a coaching thing with Rob and Michelle. we've probably known each other, I don't know, 12 years or so probably. I was trying to think. As I get older, I think something's like a year ago, and my wife will tell me, that was 5 years ago. But they are great people. We were actually in separate groups within this, and then we wound up being in the same group. And just for all the listeners out there or watchers, I'll put this on YouTube too. I just want to tell you the kind of people that Rob and Michelle are. My family went to Washington, D.C. over, what was it, Labor Day? No, that couldn't be right because it snowed. It was Martin Luther King's birthday. It was in January. And we had actually did the thing. I took my kids. We wanted to go somewhere educational every year. It was supposed to be a 3-day weekend, right? And we had actually sent off the thing where we could see the White House, do the tour. We had to get background checks, the whole 9 yards. This was several years ago. And so we go to Washington, D.C., we do the whole Smithsonian, all that stuff. This is where Rob and Joe from. And then lo and behold, I guess it was that Monday or whatever day it was, or maybe it was that Tuesday, we're supposed to see the White House. It snowed. It snowed. So our tour got canceled. Okay, fine. And we're looking at the planes, and then the airport got shut down, and we didn't have a hotel room for the night, and we don't have a flight home. So I called Rob and Michelle, and they came and got us, took us into their home, fed us. We all went sledding that night. It wound up being a great, great time, and they took us to the airport next time, and it was, they didn't know anything about this. They had their own lives to do, but they it was great. So these are the type of people that they will be my friends for life, because of I knew they were good people before that, but that.
Chris, I have to say, it was so fun seeing your kids' eyes light up with the snow. His kids, from being from down south, had never even seen snow before.
Or sled riding.
And never done sled riding. So to actually have the opportunity to take somebody out to do that had never even seen it before. Man, we were so jazzed being able to do that. I think it might have been more fun for us than it was for them.
Even
yeah. And I think it was on a golf course or something, but we're sliding down this thing, and he's like, oh yeah, this is the third green or something. I don't know. I don't know, but it's pretty fun. We were initially bummed, that we missed that, but it actually turned out better than probably seeing the White House would have anyway. So it was a good time.
Preston mentioned it snowed. No, it was an all-out blizzard.
And it was kind of crazy. Who would have thought it, But we did get out the next day or two or something. But and then as far as Dirk goes. So what happened is, just like Dirk said, and I knew Greg too, probably not as well as I knew Rob and Michelle, but I did know Greg. And so anyway, they started this thing. And I went out to the thing. I was very impressed. Now, all truth and whatever, I am not currently a member of IEB. It just at the time I had so much on my plate and different things I was doing. But I did really like what they had to say. And I have jumped out of an airplane with Dirk, so that certainly counts for something.
That was a fun day, yeah.
First time I've ever done that, so that was pretty cool. But anyway, we're all friends and colleagues, and you guys are definitely moving the needle, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk. So I guess let's get into IEB, which is an acronym for Inspection Empire Builder. I guess the most obvious question is, what makes you guys, if I'm listening to this and I'm just a regular home inspector, I didn't mean it like that, but I'm just, a normal home inspector. What do you guys have to offer? Why should I look at IEB, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think, Preston, I think, again, this goes back to just kind of those initial conversations that we had when we had, the companies come into Houston for us to interview them and see kind of where the gaps were. Here's the first thing we say is we don't do anything that somebody else does better. We're doing something that is completely different.
Right.
And we're having a conversation and we're focusing on, business growth in a way that we haven't seen anybody do in the industry before. So we don't get down into like technical talk, right? That's one thing that even on our internal Facebook pages, we tell our members, I do not want to see a picture of a hot water heater or, a HVAC system. That's not why you're here, right? Because I think there's plenty of other places where people can have technical talk. So we really focus on the conversations around proven systems and models for success in business. And we started with a core structure of here's how you build a successful service-based company. And I think Rob and Michelle can probably talk to this. But when I first started talking to Greg about certain things, and I started talking to Rob and Michelle about these kind of things too, there was almost kind of like this kickback of like, Dirk, you don't really understand our industry. Like, we don't do things like that. Like, that's not what home inspectors do. Right. And the things that I was talking about are things that so many businesses in other industries do, right? Highly successful businesses in multiple service-based industries. And the truth of it is that there are things that are universal to most businesses, right? Especially if you look at service-based businesses where you have people that are going out and doing a service. Probably 80% of running that business is based on universal success principles, and 20% or maybe even less is going to be based on the niche service that you're doing, right? So if you look at the same thing in the inspection side, it's kind of like, hey, 20% is going to be unique to your industry, and 80% is going to be unique to like overall success principles in business. But the thought comes in when you're really heavily involved in an industry, and especially if you are not open to what's happening in other industries, that you start thinking that your industry is so unique. Nobody else has the challenges that you have. Nobody else deals with the kind of stuff you have. Nobody else has that kind of regulation. I mean, there's just like all these things that you would think, oh man, like nobody else has it, when you actually look around and you look at other industries, and most people have the same kind of challenges, right? Now, here's where it really becomes different is you probably won't realize that if you are a solo entrepreneur, right? If I'm like in the inspection industry, if I'm a one-man shop, then I'm wearing all the hats, and it's going to feel like I'm really only being challenged with what's in the inspection industry. But when you start growing a business and now you start hiring more people, then the success principles of business start like multiplying. Right. And the challenge is if you start building a business from a small business and you don't build it correctly, you're going to build yourself into like a ceiling of achievement. At some point, you're going to hit the wall. And depending on which flaw you have within your company, depends on how hard you hit the wall. Because there's some companies that start with bad financial models. You cannot outgrow a bad financial model. No matter how fast and how big you get, it actually adds more pain, and it causes you to hit the wall harder, right? Same thing. You can't grow a company with the wrong organizational structure, or the wrong growth plan. Or here's a huge gap we saw in the inspection industry is like nobody was focusing on the operational divisions of their companies, right? Everybody was either talking about doing inspections or marketing. And we like in our core structure, we say, look, you've got 3 core divisions. One is services, one is operations, and one is growth, right? So don't even think it's just marketing, it's growth, because I think a lot of people even talked about marketing. We're like, what exactly is marketing? How do you define that? So we really kind of just took the structure and overlaid it to an inspection company. And now we're able to really start helping people understand how to grow and scale their businesses. But I mean, our tagline in IEB is like, look, learn how to grow faster with higher profitability and more time freedom. And I think ultimately, Preston, like that's what people want. Like when they started the business at some point, they were picturing that they were going to, make money and have time freedom, right? And they didn't want to go work for somebody else. They wanted to do their own thing. But then, like most entrepreneurs that go out there and start a business, at some point they find out that, what I really have is a glorified job, because I can't really take much time off. There's certainly not I can't take 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month off, and my business continues to run. So really, you're not a business owner, you're self-employed, right? Which means that it's the same as being employed, you just work for yourself. And there's a big difference in being self-employed and actually running a business, right? There's a huge difference. Like Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant really.
The quadrants. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think we've worked with some really big companies in the industry, and I think percentage-wise over anybody else that does training education in the industry, percentage-wise, we've got more large companies in IEB. And we're finding that a lot of large companies are coming from other, training and coaching organizations, and they're coming to IEB and saying like, man, like this is what I've been missing. Like this has been the missing link for me. So it's been really cool. I've been able to, like Rob and Michelle, were some of the first large companies, besides Greg, that I started working with one-on-one. So I was really able to get to know them. And first off, I 100% agree with you, Preston. Like Rob and Michelle are amazing human beings, and they've become they first were clients, and they become dear friends since then. And they're also our business partners now. So, we just saw the level of integrity they have, the care, and their heart for the industry is amazing. How they are just so willing to help other people on their journey, have the conversations with them, help them out. It's been really cool to get to know you guys too.
Awesome. Well, let me add to what you're saying, Dirk, because so for all the listeners out there, and you probably already know this, the home inspection industry is a relatively young industry if you compare it to any other profession. It really only kind of started in the 1980s. I mean, before that, everybody worked for the seller. So it's kind of evolved. And so what happens is, I think in the beginning, everybody was just a technician. And there's nothing wrong with being, I mean, you have to be a technician, and that's the most important part. I mean, you could argue any, but obviously if you're not doing a good home inspection, nothing else happens. But I think as we evolved, then, you know, as you start to grow, there's other parts to it. And I always tell people there's three parts to this business. There's the technical part, the technician, which is very important. There's the administrative part, which is the organization, the scheduling, the organizational chart, the whole 9 yards with that. And then there's the marketing part. And for the longest time, there were and there's some really good resources out there on the technical part. And you can find that. And I don't want to say one and not say the other or something like that, but they're out there. And
there's a lot of stuff available in the industry.
Yeah. And then I think we evolved to getting some marketing thing. But and there was some really good stuff with that. And then I just sort of found myself in uncharted waters where, like, all right, but how do I don't know what, I mean, I don't know who's, the accountability and how do you motivate? And now I got all these people because I can't scale myself. I mean, I have to build it up. And then what I found was whatever little weaknesses you had as a one man or one person shop or whatever, as you scale up, they get magnified. Like you got a little problem, you're not good with this or that. It's okay. It's okay if you're just the one person because you've got enough you can compensate for that. But then when you get up to a certain level, it's like that now like really holds you back or, really holds your time. And there really wasn't, I mean, it's funny you should mention all that. My wife and I had that same conversation a couple of years ago where there is a lot of stuff about technical stuff you can get help with that. There is a lot of stuff out there about marketing, but there really just wasn't much stuff about like management, leadership, compensation, all that stuff, which it seems like that's what you guys are. And truth be told, I just went to one meeting, but I have been admiring from afar and all that sort of stuff. My one fear, and see if you can address this. My one fear, if I was to join, is because I was in some things before where it was basically like, I mean, I don't know how to say this, but I kind of felt like if you didn't do it my way, then you're wrong. And I did not like that. My business has to fit my personality. You know what I mean? And granted, I want to listen to all this, but I didn't like you do it my way or you're wrong type sort of thing. What would your answer be to that?
Yeah, so I'd say here's the thing. There's a lot of different ways to do a lot of different things, right? So we understand that. We've got some core models that can be adaptable, right? So we definitely understand, because here's the thing about the industry. Preston, the first thing you said was like it's a young industry, and that's absolutely right. It's still a very, very young industry. It's going through levels of maturity, and now it's really in the evolution of, you said, hey, technician to marketing. Now it's going into the business evolution of it, right? So what you're seeing in the industry, and the first thing to understand is that, let me park that. Let me answer your question first, right? No, there's no such thing as you have to do it like this, because one thing is your business has to fit your vision for what your business is and what you want out of it. That's number one. And I think the challenge is that too many people try to compare themselves to how other people do things and try to mimic other people, and then it doesn't work. So again, we look at core foundational models, but that essentially kind of is the structure. Like that may be kind of like the pouring the slab and the framing, But then from there, you can choose kind of where you want to put your walls and how you want to decorate your walls, like all that kind of stuff, right? You get to customize and get creative on the way you want to do things. And in IEB, we've got a level called the enterprise level, which is our highest level of membership. And for us, we're not a pay-to-play organization, right? So we've got 4 levels of membership, and they're very pure, meaning depending on the size of your company, how many people you have, how many inspections you're doing, what your revenue is, depends on which level of membership you're going to. But at the enterprise level, we've now got 6 companies, and these are all just incredibly like fast-growing, successful, large companies. And what we see is we actually meet weekly to kind of have some amazing conversations. What we see is there's variations in like how these companies do things, but what we've seen now in the last 18 months is that because these companies are so connected to each other and they're so open book, what's happening is one is borrowing from another. Hey, let me take this from you and you take this from me. Like there's constant sharing and collaboration that we're creating. And what's happening is we're starting to slowly but surely really start nailing down the specific models of how to build a really large company in the inspection industry, right? One of the things, and this goes back to my previous conversation that I parked, is that we're now seeing that the industry is going to the business side of things. So we know that business is changing, right? And that's not just the inspection industry, that's all industries across the globe. Every single industry right now is going through change and disruption because of technology, right? So the real estate industry is no different. And the one thing to understand is, the home inspection is a subset of a much larger industry, right? When you look at a real estate transaction, I think like this is where sometimes I've had conversations with home inspectors and they kind of miss this point, right? Is that there's a big real estate transaction going on. There's a lot of different people involved in it, right? There's brokerage involved, there's title, there's mortgage, there's the home inspector, contractors. Like there's a lot of people involved. And the thing about it is that if something major happens in one of these other sectors, it somehow also affects the inspection industry.
Right.
And, and that's the thing is that we're all connected, right? So here's what happens. Because those other industries are also being disrupted, and real estate especially, you got so much money coming in to try to take a hold of the real estate transaction that the inspection company is also being disrupted. And we have been, since we've started, we've been keeping like real taps on like what's happening in the industry, who's coming in. And what you're seeing is that you've got a lot of VC money that's coming in. You've got big companies that are buying up service providers in the industry, hedge funds, everything. There's a lot of money pouring into the inspection industry right now, right? Because everybody's starting to understand the power that the inspection industry really holds, right? But here's the cool thing is, and this is what we tell people, look, if all of those people are pouring into the industry right now, they're after something that you already have, which gives you like a front row seat in how to take advantage of it, right? So I was really surprised when I first looked at the industry to see that how small the companies are. Even if you're looking at the largest companies in America, inspection companies, they're tiny, right? Most industries out there have at least a $50 million business in them. Most industries have $100 million businesses, if not billion-dollar businesses, right? So when we first looked at the inspection industry, I think that when we first looked at it, I think the top company was somewhere around like a $10 million company. Right? If you look at the grand scheme of things, that's still a small company. So what's happening in IEB is we really approached it from the mindset of how do we really start laying the tracks for $100 million a year inspection company? Like, what does that look like? And the way that we've also approached it is we really focus on private ownership, right? So it's not, our model of how we really grow is not a franchise model. It's a private owned company, right? So, hey, Rob, Michelle, if you guys want a $100 million company, here's how you start going towards that. And what's cool is that we've got all these large companies now that are really coming together. And what they're learning is that sometimes you want to do it your way. And sometimes that's because maybe your way works really well, or sometimes it's because there's ego and pride tied up in your way. Right. So it's just a combination, but sometimes it's, hey, can I let go of this a little bit and grab onto this a little bit and just look at a different way of doing it. One of the things we don't really talk about in IEB is that you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
And as long as you're really grabbing onto like, this is what I know and I know how to do it, you're missing a huge opportunity and saying like, what else could be?
Sure. Well, I have a question I want to throw to you and Rob and Michelle too. I'm all about, I get what you're saying, you know, building a business, laying the tracks for a larger business. What if I'm the home inspector that really does just want to stay a one-man shop, but I'm aware that there's changes coming to the industry, and you know the venture capitalism money and all this stuff's coming, and I'm a little bit worried about, you know, can I still hang on? And I like being a one-man shop. I like the independence. I like that. Can IEB help me? I'm going to throw this to Rob and Michelle, and then back to Dirk. Does IEB have something for me? You know, if I don't want to build $100 million business, but I just don't want to lose what I have, and I want to be a little more efficient at what I'm doing.
There's always
go ahead, guys.
There's always going to be a place for the one-man show. Just like in real estate, there's always the small boutique office. It's never going away because there's a market for that.
Right.
But they're not going to have a huge market share. Currently, we're running things kind of like a cottage industry. There's a whole bunch of little fiefdoms with all over the place, and we really haven't nailed down how to do this in larger scale for the most part. We have conversations with people almost daily about what it looks like to grow their business. And many of the conversations start with, well, you know, I don't want my business to grow any bigger because I don't want the headaches. I don't want the problems. I don't want this to happen and that happen. And those are, to a large part, limiting beliefs. And the reason they feel that way is because they've tried to grow a little bit and they haven't had success. And
Yeah.
It's a large part because they're doing it wrong. And if they were to do things right, in the right order, with the right ideas and the right mindsets, then those problems would quickly go away. You know, my answer to I don't want to grow my business is, are you saying that you don't want to work 12 hours a day, or are you saying that you don't want more money? Because you can have more money. You don't have to work 12 hours a day. Michelle and I probably put in 20 hours a week now.
Oh gosh, I'm so jealous. I put 20 in this weekend already.
And we did that because, in large part, with the help of Dirk, to put systems and processes in place that help our business run on its own.
But back to your question, Preston, I think there are quite a few people in IEB that would be like our builder level, that, you know, they're a single man. And, you know, it's not because you're in IEB, you have to grow a large business. We help them set up that business because most single operators at some point in time, they dream of selling their business. And so we help them put those practices in place so that when they do want to step out, their business is saleable. Because most people, as we mentioned in the beginning of this call, are self-employed. They don't have a business to sell. They have a job to sell, and nobody wants to buy your job.
Yeah. And you're a fairly big business also, Preston. How many times a year does somebody come to you and say, you know what, I'm really tired of this. I need to retire. I want to move to Florida, wherever. And would you be interested in buying my business? And, you know, they've been doing this for 20, 30 years. And
there's nothing really to buy, though. There's nothing.
That's it, yeah.
There's no database. There's no systems. There's no processes. There's no people.
I mean, you basically got a website and a phone. I've had that, and I like the people too, and I feel bad. I'm like, I would love to, you know, help you, but honestly, there's not that. You can't sell you. I mean, the customers you have love you. That's the value of your company, and you're going to leave. So I can't buy you. I mean, the website and the phone number have a little bit of value, but not the value that you have, and you're the person that's leaving. So, I mean, there's, like you said, there's no systems to buy, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what we do for that single guy, the guy that wants to stay single, is we try to help him build his business so that it is saleable.
So if he can operate his business in a professional manner using good business practices and getting people that he hires to perform at a high level and hiring the right person and identifying the sweet spot in their business. Every business has a sweet spot. If you can maximize that sweet spot and develop systems so that it is saleable, even if it's just you. Have a good database, have good marketing strategy, have good processes. And if you can do that, I would love to buy your business.
Yeah.
But, they need to set it up properly.
Right. Let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you guys both. This question is going to have to do with objections. I'll set it up. Basically, what objections do you hear? What would your answer be to that? But then I'm just going to go ahead and give you my objection, okay, if that's okay. My objection is I've just been involved in so many different things, and so many, I go to this association's conference, I go to that association's conference. I was in this coaching program, I was in that coaching program, and I have kids, and I want to take vacation, and they got travel ball, and they got all, and it's just, oh my gosh, at some point, and then it gets to the point, in the past, I mean, I don't want to knock anybody out there. I don't want this to be misconstrued, but it's kind of like, in a lot of things you join, there's a lot of initial value, but over time, it's not as much value to you. It's kind of like that. You ever heard that cheeseburger thing? If you're really hungry, man, that first cheeseburger is like, wow. But the 10th cheeseburger, it doesn't really, diminishing marginal returns, I guess, is the economic thing.
Yeah.
So that was kind of I'm just being honest. I mean, so obviously there's a ton of value out there. What's the continuing value, and what kind of time? And I get it. You do need to meet. You do need to hold each other accountable. But I guess my personal objection to any kind of new thing is my plate overloadeth now. I guess. So what would your answer be to that?
Here's what I'd say. Number one is you really have to look at what are you looking for, right? Because again, people, it's amazing when you ask people what you want. Most people don't know what they want, but if they think they know what they want, they say, "Oh, I want to grow," right? But then when you start asking them, "Okay, well, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?" I mean, you really start getting into it. You find that most people don't know, right? So I think people are in a place of pain and they tend to grab onto things. Right. And I think that's why there's a lot of people that have businesses to just sell things to a place of pain, right? And what we're kind of doing in IEB is to say, look, here's what we do. We help businesses grow faster with higher profitability and more time freedom. Like, again, that's so simple. That's what we do, right? So
that's worth repeating. Say that again.
We help businesses grow faster with higher profitability and more time freedom. And I'd love to, if we have time, kind of go through how we were able to do that for Rob and Michelle, and kind of, because I mean, it's amazing when you see this transform, right? So here's the thing, Preston. Okay, there's a lot going on. Like, hey, what am I going to get out of it? The cool thing about IEB is that at the core, we look at it more as a research and development company, right? Obviously, we do coaching and training, but we're constantly doing research and doing development. And I mean, we've got things now that we have in development that are probably going to come out to the marketplace a year from now. We got things that are in development that'll probably be coming out to the marketplace in 2 years from now. But when we first started, and I mean, here's the funny thing, right? I told Greg yes. We made some phone calls. We kind of had a conference, and we had a lot of people join right off the bat. This was back in 2017, 2 years ago. And I mean, immediately the first time, I mean, I think we had 100% conversion of people that came to our event that became members. And Greg and I looked at each other and we were kind of like, what now? Right. So we had to scramble and just started getting content developed. And I would say initially, if you were in IEB, the first 5 months, it probably wasn't the highest level of value. Right. But the cool thing is we still have 17 companies with us that were there from the very start, and we call them legacy companies now. But I mean, we've gone from that, and by the middle of last year, we did a complete revamp on everything within IEB. Digitally is included. And we're now starting to go into our second complete revamp, right? So we're now going into the third iteration of IEB, and we're 2 years old. So what's happened now is, I mean, we went from, you know, kind of those first initial few companies, and now we've got 160 companies that are within IEB, and we're growing at a really fast rate. The cool thing again is that we're constantly learning, we're asking what's working, what's not working, what's your model. And again, because we're using this model, and we're really understanding that, look, there's a core structure to this. What we do in the enterprise level is we're collaborating, developing together, and we can hand that down to the entrepreneur level, kind of based on their size and how they can use it. And then we hand it down to the builder level based on their size and how they can use it. And then we do have something called the launch level, which is, a fully automated 6-month program for maybe that person that's new in the industry or that one-man shop that may not want $100 million company, right? I mean, that's the thing is people hear something like that and they're like, well, I don't want a $100 million company. And it's like, look, you may not want a $100 million company, but we're going to lay the tracks that if you ever choose to, you can. Because exactly what Rob said a while ago, what happens is people, a lot of times it's like, I don't want more people because I've been in a position before where I managed a lot of people and it sucked the life out of me. And it's because, one, you were still wearing your technician hat trying to be a leader, right? Like if you're a one-man shop today, you are the technician, meaning that you're the services director. You are the operator, which means you're the director of operations, and you are the person out there trying to grow your company, which is the director of growth, right? Those are those three key areas, but also there's the CEO in the company. If you're a one-man shop today, you're still a CEO of a business. Right. And what happens is if you can transition from wearing the technical hat all the time to start wearing the CEO hat more and more and more, what happens is your business will grow faster with more profitability and more time freedom, right? Here's the interesting thing, Preston. Like when we studied companies that have really been successful in the inspection industry, do you know what the single turning point was for that company to explode in growth? Do you know what the single point was?
I'm going to take a guess, is that they were able to remove themselves from. I heard a quote one time: you start a business because you think you can do everything better, and then you systematically have to remove yourself from each. But it's so hard because it goes against the grain. But I would say some type of removal of yourself. Sorry, didn't mean to.
Yeah, it's the owner getting out of the field.
Yeah.
Right? The moment that the owner gets out of the field is the moment that the business explodes in growth. And we've seen this over and over and over and over. Now, here's the sad thing is that for a lot of business owners, they didn't actively make the decision to get out of the field. They were forced out of the field. Like it was either a health issue or something with a family member that they had to really like, something prevented them from going in and still doing, 400, 500 inspections a year, right? Because I mean, the owners are the ones out there, they're not doing 200 or 300, they're out there doing 500, 600, 700, right? Because they're trying to make more money and trying to take their business to the next level. But the thought is, like, I was talking to some people the other day, like, do you remember when you first got into business and you were just like, man, if I can just make like $2,000 a month, and then you say, well, if I could just make $5,000 a month, or like, could you imagine life if we could make $10,000 a month, right? Well, you tend to think like in little increments like that. Like, and if you're in the business long enough, then you start saying like, wow, what if we could make 100,000 a month, right? Then you get to the point where you may say, what if we could make 500,000 a month? But the challenge is every step, if you don't look ahead, then every point of it is going to be a really challenging growth point, because you're not putting your GPS in from like, hey, I want to go from point A to point Z. You're just kind of saying like, how do I go from A to B? But then you don't have any context for what like C or D or E or anything else is, right? So if you can start really looking at, okay, what would it look like if I wanted to make, take home $250,000 a year. I wanted to work maybe 20 hours a week. I don't want to be on evenings and I don't want to be on weekends, right? What would I need to be able to do, right? That's the answer that the inspection industry has not been able to give. And for IEB, because we've laid track for how to build these really large companies, we understand the models and the pathway of like, if somebody wants that, we can put them on that pathway. We can say like, hey, here are the core fundamental things that you're going to need to do if you want this to happen. And inevitably what we see happen is like, as people move towards that, then they start dreaming bigger. They're like, wow, because I have the systems and the models and support now, you know, now it makes sense of how I can actually do this twice as big and actually still make more money and have more time freedom, right? And I think like, you know, maybe I think this would be a great place for Rob and Michelle to kind of share, because I mean, I remember in the start of 2018, I was talking to Rob and Michelle, and I said, hey, what's really important to you about this year? You know, and at this point, I'd kind of done a full evaluation on their business, and I knew where their business was, you know, and, you know, Rob was talking about like, hey, I think I want to grow this percentage wise and things like that. And I said, okay, cool. And I said, Michelle, what do you want? And she said, I want my life back. Right. I mean, that was the answer. Like, I don't care about growing, and I don't care about making more money. I want my life back. And that's the thing that people don't get. It's not about growing a big company. It's about what growing a bigger company can do for you and your family. Like, that's what it's about. And like, people think that if you talk about building a big company that you're just after money or that you're greedy. And it's the exact opposite. Like, the people that build the most successful large companies are the ones that are actually the most generous back to their people, their families, their employees, because what they're able to do is they're able to give them their time, and there's money involved. Right. So when we look at freedom, like, freedom is always going to be a function of like time and money. Right. And we ask people like, hey, have you ever had a lot of money and no time? Right. Yeah. Okay. Have you ever had a lot of time and no money?
It's been a long time, but when I was in college, maybe.
Yeah. But I mean, like, you look at either one of those equations, and they're bunk equations. Right. Life becomes really good now when you have time freedom and you have money, because now you got options. I've got the time to go do what I want to go do, and I've got the money that I can go do what I want to do. But the challenging thing is that, you know, we tell people like, look, developing as a leader is the path to get both. And that's the thing, is as long as you're wearing just the technician hat and you're not actively pouring into yourself as a CEO, like understanding your business, understanding your people, looking at the systems and models, like understanding like the path of where you're going, it's going to be really difficult to ever get to that point of freedom. But yeah, I'd love to get Robin and Michelle's, you know, kind of take on how things are being.
I completely agree with what you said, Dirk, and I remember that conversation very well. And I was kind of surprised at Michelle, but she was absolutely right. What do we have? What's our biggest limitation in our lives? And it's, we only have so much time. That's not going to change. We can have more money, we can have less money, but we only have so much time. And we've spent the last 2 years really focusing on what would it look like to get back as much time as possible. And, you know, we were willing to take a hit in our business in order to do that. And surprisingly enough, we managed to grow our business even bigger while doing that. But, you know, 2 years ago, I was still working 8-12-hour days, and Michelle was in there doing 8-hour days also. And our focus has been, what can we put in place that will have other people doing what we used to do? And how can we document the processes of what we do in a way that will allow those people to succeed in those jobs? And we now have people in all of those positions. And which company would be more valuable to you? The $4 million company that no one has to go to work, the owner doesn't have to go to work at all, or the $4 million company that the owner has to spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day at? You know, one of them is going to be infinitely more valuable to a potential buyer. And it doesn't have to be 4 million, it could be 400,000. Or even 100,000. It doesn't matter. We have a limited amount of time, and to us, it was more important to be able to go to our daughter's soccer games, to be able to. Michelle coaches basketball and soccer, and she wants to be at all of those things. I have things I like to do, and I want to be able to take part in. And you know what? That was a big impact for us. And surprisingly enough, while doing that, we doubled our profit margin.
Actually, quadrupled our profit margin. When we joined IEB, we were around 5 to 8%, and now we're somewhere around 20 to 24%.
Wow.
So,
all right, I have two questions. I'm going to sneak two in here. I'm going to ask two. I'll just give them to you so you got time. the first question will be, you know, everybody's, now I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Everybody's talking about a coming recession. I don't know if it's going to, you know, I've been hearing that every year for the last 6 years. I'm going to ask a question. You know, one thing that worries me is hiring all these people, buying all this equipment. Now I got all this outlay and, you know, I got a lot of stuff to feed, so to speak. And if there is a recession, how can I battle that? All right, that's one question. But first, I want to ask another question. I just want you to be thinking that one over in your mind. Since I got you here on tape and I got you here, I want some free IEB. Some, you know, when you're at the party and they're like, hey, I want you to come look at this over here. Or, you know, you talk to a doctor like, so since I got you, I do want to ask you some free IEB advice, and then I want to go on to that other question after that. My question is, my own personal is, here's where I am. I, you know, have hired people, and just like every listener out there who's ever hired somebody, we all struggled with that at first. It was kind of like, you know, nobody can inspect as good as me. The realtors always want me, you know. I overcame that hurdle and hired people, you know, and you guys did too, obviously. And then eventually got to the point where, you know, honestly, I probably have inspectors that are better than me. And nobody requests me anymore. They used to, you know. And it hurt my feelings a little bit in having that free time. I got over it pretty quick. But here's where I am now is I went into the marketing part of it. And I'm sort of like that. And you know, it's funny because we got a lot of advice, hire the marketing person first, do the inspections, you know, that should be your first hire. Well, it wasn't my first hire. It's probably my last, you know. I went in and did the marketing. You know, I wear the crazy pants. I do all the presentations. I run all over God's green earth, you know, wherever I can do a lunch or whatever. And I've been doing that hard for like 10 straight years. And I'm getting tired, man. I'm getting tired.
So you must be tired.
Yeah, I'm getting tired. And so for me, you know, I hired one marketing person. It didn't work out. I've got another one that so far so good. But it's tough for me with that because, you know, with an inspector, it's very much more structured what that job description looks like, what you got to do. There's standards and practice, there, you know, SOPs, and there's, you know, it's very structured. To me, that was an easier hire and an easier train, where this is a little more creative. It's a little bit more all over the map. It's different things every day. The accountability is kind of crazy, and there's got to be some. I'm struggling with that, and you know, my manager. I do have a manager that's great, and he told me, and he's absolutely right. The problem is, I should be overseeing the entire business, but I am so focused and so involved in that one part, the marketing part. And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I'm really good at it too. But I can't be really good at that and really good at the overall. And I'm struggling. It's like the same. Nobody can do it as good as me. You know, the same. And I know the answer. Believe me, I know the answer. I know the answer, but I still have a hard time doing it. You know, how do I get from there to here? And I like doing that too, but I hit a point where I just can't grow beyond that, and I'm wearing myself out. You know, I'm just tired. So,
I love this conversation because I think the way that you're talking about being the marketer in your company is the way that a lot of people feel on the inspection side, right? And they have the exact same conversation, but they're like, man, I love it. I'm good at it, you know, and you've already overcome it on that side. But I think you naturally may be more of a marketer than maybe a technical guy. I mean, I think like I've seen some of the stuff you do, and I think that there's a level of genius in the way that you market and your creativity and the way you think through that. So that's going to be kind of where you're naturally drawn to, right? But I mean, the first question that I have for you is like, Preston, is what you're doing right now scalable?
No. I mean, it was fine as long as we were going up, but then we kind of leveled out, and then I realized
because you only have so many hours in the day.
Any faster, you know?
you only have so many hours in the day, right? So as long as it's based on Preston doing the work, you're wearing the marketer hat and you're being the lid on your business right now, right? And here's the truth is that, Preston, if you own a business, you are always the lid on your own business. I don't care who you are. And I don't like people that say like nobody can do it better than me. That is such an arrogant statement.
I know.
Like such an arrogant, and I mean, I'm not pointing at you on this.
No, I agree with you, and I know.
I'm pointing at me. I'm pointing at like everybody else out there, because here's the truth: is as human beings, you're not really good at a lot of things. There's actually very few things that you're good at. So what you want to do is you want to really kind of get into your area of focus and what you're good at, what you love doing. But the other thing is, just like you did on the inspection side, you say it's so much easier on that side because it's so much more structured. The truth is you could very easily structure everything on the growth side of your business, and you can put systems and models in. You can learn who to hire for what positions. Now, you may not find somebody else that likes to wear the crazy pants and it's like, the life of the party at the real estate thing. Like that may always be you, but what you can do is you can help other people, because at the end of the day, Preston, what you're doing is you're building branding, but what you're really doing is you're building relationships, right? You can hire other people to go out and build relationships with real estate offices, with top producing agents, and you can systematize it, hold it accountable. And I mean, like, this is one of the things that we've done in IEB is really help people understand the growth side of their business. We don't call it marketing because there's other ways to grow besides just marketing, right? Marketing is kind of a subset of it. So we say, look, there's prospecting, marketing, and retention. And there are three different areas in the growth side of your business. And you have to understand how to influence all three. And so you may kind of have a hyper focus on one area, but we could break that down and say, okay, look, what does the whole look like? And then where is going to be your best return for time and effort and energy spent? Yeah. Now, let's figure that out and exactly what that pathway looks like. Let's hire somebody in and then start training them and holding them accountable. And again, it's just like on the inspection side. Like when you really started figuring things out, and you especially as you start hiring, more and more inspectors, you're going to figure out like the kind of people that you want to hire, how to train them, how to help them be successful in the field. The exact same thing on the growth side, right? What you're having a challenge with is that there's not a lot of companies in the industry that have gotten to the point where the owners are out of all three areas, right? It's like rare air up there right now. Like that's why the enterprise level, like we only have 6 companies, and it's not that there's not other companies that are big companies out there, but the cool thing is in these 6 companies, the owners are completely out of all 3 areas, and they can really holistically look at their businesses, right? Yeah. So, for you, I would say, look, there's a sense of genius in doing the things you do, right? So you can continue to do that, and you got to build the systems and processes to hire the right people in and bring them in. And what you'll see is, and I guarantee you, man, like, because we've done it with Greg's company, Rob and Michelle's company, I mean, like Blake and Angela, I mean, like, we've duplicated this over and over and over, that if you get the right structure on the growth side, you can grow really fast and spending a fraction of the money that you used to spend on growth, right? One of the things I've seen in the inspection industry is people spend way too much money on marketing, and they don't know how to track the returns on it. And they're doing things that are antiquated and sometimes even like a lower level of doing things, right? So the challenge here is that if you don't start really thinking about like, how can I go further with less, and there's a clear path on how to do that, then what will happen is you're going to spend too much time and effort and energy and money on marketing. And then when you look at your P&L, you don't have a lot of money left over at the end of the year. But you have to treat this with the same kind of intensity as you did when you got out of the field, right? You got to say, look, I'm going to commit to a system on the growth side of it, and look at, okay, what are my options, right? How would I want to add some structure to it, and then still add your creativity to it. But the thing is, you can't expect somebody to be like a mini Preston, right? You may like that may just be like so unique to you that it's not quite duplicatable. And the thing is, when you want to scale a business, it's all about, just like on your inspection side, you had to create something that somebody else can duplicate. Right. If you can't create something that somebody else can duplicate on the growth side, it's going to be a really hard path for you to grow your business and scale it, right? And here's the other thing that you could probably see is that, dude, like once you crack that nut, you could probably start growing really aggressively. And like the main challenge that you'll have is like, how am I going to hire inspectors fast enough to deal with the capacity? Like that's one thing that, I mean, all of our larger companies in IEB, like this year, their number one challenge wasn't growing in terms of like, how do I get more business? It was 100% on like, I cannot hire people and get them in the field fast enough. I mean, we had companies that turned, like we actually just got done with this conversation. We had companies that turned down $500,000 to $700,000 worth of inspections this year because they didn't have enough guys in the field, right? And that's the result of them starting to put systems on the growth side that really grow companies faster at a lower cost, right? So I think approach it the same way. Like just really, it sounds like part of it is like you're still not 100% convicted that I have to step into my company as a CEO, even if you have a general manager, right? That there's a big part of your identity that's in that marketing and growth side. And you may feel like, man, if I'm out of that, then am I still it's still gonna be my creativity. And the cool thing is, dude, it'll always be your company. You'll always be able to put the spin on it. You'll always be able to put the creativity on it. But if you can duplicate a system that you can hire other people to and train them and have them execute it, all of a sudden you just took the lid off of your business. And I mean, you can see explosive growth happening. And dude, you're going to get your time back, man. You're going to start being able to hang out with your family more.
I hear you. Now the second part. Oh, go ahead.
Would you pay somebody $300 or $400 an hour to do what you do?
To get 100% back. Well, I know you used to say this. It was good. Like if you, what is it? Would you give up a small percentage of your income to get 100% of your time back or something?
Yeah. But more important than that, I mean, if right now you as a CEO are probably worth $300 to $400 to $500 an hour.
Right.
You're paying somebody right now $300, $400, $500 an hour to do marketing. It's you, but you're paying somebody to do.
Yeah. I see.
Now, could you not get massive productivity for say $50 or $75 an
hour? Yeah, you could probably hire a whole team of people.
Yeah, exactly. Would they be as effective as you? Probably not. But you'd save a lot of money. And in answer to your question earlier about what happens if there's a recession, well, if you focus on having really top quality systems in place that are well dialed in, and you're not paying people more than you have to, and your profit margin is up, if things slow down, you can take a little bit of hit on the profit end. You can step in every now and then and do a little something. How special would it be to have Preston show up in his wacky pants for a big event every now and then, as opposed to going out, every time there's something going on?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
and like, Michelle and I go to marketing events. Do that every now and then.
You know what this is like? It's like if I was a smoker and you're telling me smoking's bad for me, and I know it. I know that. But it's just I know and I agree with what you're saying. I am not disagreeing.
Yeah.
It's just I haven't been able to do it, and that's the hard part. I just need to kick my own.
And it's the same thing with the inspector that wants to do all the inspections himself. It's okay to do that, but you have to realize you're paying yourself $200-300 an hour. Would there be a better way? The answer in most cases is yes.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this.
I think again, Preston, let me just say this. I think the other thing too, and I love what Rob said, is because it's awesome that you know it and you're admitting to it. And you're like, hey, I'm in this place, right? So thank you for your authenticity on that. And here's the cool thing is, it's almost like, what if you framed it differently? You said like, man, what would happen to me if something happened and I couldn't work for like 90 days or 6 months? Like, what would happen to my business then? Because if you start framing it a little bit differently, I think like this is what Rob said earlier, like, hey, if something happened to me, what happens to my business, right? When you start thinking about it in that way, then it's almost like, oh my gosh, like, okay, let's just go through the exercises of like kind of talking that through and walking that out, right? Because if everything is dependent on Preston being the marketer, then it's kind of like, oh, if something happens to Preston, man, that company's going to tank, right? But all of a sudden, if you can build that system in, and the same thing that Rob said is like, initially when you hire somebody, they're not going to be as efficient that you are. But here's the thing. Over time, they'll probably become better at you than a lot of things. And you'll find that, again, people love seeing you, and maybe it's at the big events and the big get-togethers, and you're saying hi to everybody and like shaking hands and kissing babies and like all that kind of stuff. But day in and day out, you've got a team of people that are out there like pushing the company's growth forward, right?
Well, it's funny, and you're absolutely right. What if something happened to me? This is connected to why I didn't join initially. This is connected. When I told you that like there's all these different conferences and this stuff, my kids, because every time I go out of town or go to something, no marketing is being done in my business because I'm the sole marketer. So that's kind of my thinking. I'm like, dude, I'm already going to this and that, and I just, and I know the answer, but I like I said, I'm just like a smoker who knows what's healthy, but I just can't.
You haven't hit the wall of pain hard enough yet, right? Because that's all it is. At a certain point, the pain of doing it will be way greater than the pain of not doing it. But until that happens, and unfortunately for companies, that's the truth. It's like, look, you can see a company is in pain, but until the owner like gets to the point where the pain switches and they're like, okay, I'm ready. And sadly for most people, it's like when they've been just like beat down enough, right? I know on my journey, like my life really transformed when I had a business that failed miserably and my back was just against the ground, right? That was a turning point for me because I just didn't have any other options. But I think like that's the cool thing about it is even if it's not right now, it may be right in a year from now or 2 years or 5 years from now, but it's there's no pressure on it. Like, I mean, that's the thing is like, look, it's when it's right, it's right. But I do want to jump into this real quick. I don't know if we're still going to talk about the recession because this is an important conversation. We've actually really been talking about this in IEB a lot. The first thing to understand is that when a recession happens, it's not like business just dries up and goes away, right? There's just a shift in the percentage of business that's happening. And a lot of people think like, well, what if I really start kind of ramping up and a recession happens, right? So the first thing is that you have to be smart in your economic model and you have to run projections and forecasts for that if you're really going to grow. But again, if you're serious about growing, that's how you run a business. It's not by having a guessing game. You let the numbers tell you the story of the business and then it can tell you what you can and can't do, right? It's based on financials. But here's the thing is that if you get really aggressive on growth, what happens when a recession happens is the whole pie just gets a little bit smaller. It doesn't go away. I mean, even if you look back at like 2007, 8, 9, there's nowhere in the country that the pie went away, right? There's some parts of the country that the pie got smaller by 40, 50% maybe, that was severe shifts. But even then, most markets were down. I mean, if we look at kind of like nationally, we're maybe down like 20%. There's a lot of markets that actually just went flat. I mean, if you were in Houston, Texas, Houston kind of flattened out during that time, but there wasn't like really a recession here. So one is real estate's hyper local, right? So with the recession coming, there would have to be something major that triggers that would be as bad as what it was in 2007, 8, 9, 10, right? But let's just say the market adjusts and it shrinks 10%. All that means is that your pie shrunk by 10%. And so the thing is, if you get aggressive about growth, you can make that up and you can't control the market, but you can control your market share. So now all it means is that, look, the pie's smaller, go get some other pie. You got to go out and get somebody else's pie. And that's where when people don't know the correct measures to take, the actions to take, then their pie gets gobbled up from the market, but their pie also gets gobbled up from other people that are more aggressively taking market share. And that's actually an incredible opportunity, right? Wealth is transferred during down markets. Like people think that people make money when the market's good. The general population makes a little bit of money, and let's say a little bit, right, of money when the market goes up. When the market tanks, that's when the people that are in the right positions make a lot of money. That's where wealth is transferred. That's where market share is transferred, right? So if you can, as the market shifts and starts going down, if you can really be aggressive about hitting your growth, being smart about your P&L, what happens is at the bottom of that market, when it starts going back up again, if you were able to retain all of your people and your resources, even if that means that, you had to way cut down on your lifestyle expenses or maybe sell the expensive car and drive a old beater for a couple of years. Like, I mean, if you can marginalize your spending, but keep all your resources, when the market turns back around and starts going back into a growth market again, everybody else at this point has like, they've downsized everything, let go of their people, they let go of their equipment. And you are now in a position where you are going to explode in growth, in the next several years, right?
Yeah, you're like Bubba Gump, like when all the hurricane comes and all the other ships get wrecked and you're like the last ship.
That's it. That's it, man. That's exactly it, right? Because that's it. Because then you're already primed to continue to go. We tell people in IEB, look, a market shift is going to be your best opportunity to build a bigger company. Like you want this to happen, right? You want this to happen because if you're ready for it, the reason that people don't want like shifts to happen is because they're scared, because they don't know what to do. They don't know what the game plan is, and they have fear built around it. That's all they can think about. If you switch to thinking on it, you say like, look, I want that to happen because here's what's going to happen is it's going to help me really run my business tight and take market share from my competitors, right? That's because that's the play during a down market. So if you can kind of realize that, it becomes a big opportunity. But here's the cool thing. People think that, oh, if the market shifts, like that's a shift, but you actually have a shift in like every year within your industry. We actually just ran the numbers this week on our IEB training calls where we were asking people how much does the market shift between the peak season and the low season? And the averages that we got is that it's about a 30% shift. So you got to think every single year in your marketplace, the market shifting, you have a mini recession in your marketplace every single year, and it's called a seasonal shift. So the same thing is happening now just on a national scale maybe, or like in a wider scale, and the overall pie gets smaller. But you got to understand the pie in your local market expands and shrinks every year. And you've got the exact same opportunity. Like we're telling our IB companies, like right now is the time that you got to hit the growth accelerator and go out and grow your company faster now than you have at any other point in the year, right? October, November, and December is when you're pushing the growth accelerator because most people in the real estate industry are kind of like backing up. They're starting to take vacations. They're kind of slowing down. They want to rest. And it's like, no, like you go after it now. And then what happens is you're grabbing market share. The market, right? The number of inspections are going to start going down, right? All the way through like January. So the market is shrinking. We're already in a seasonal recession right now, right? A seasonal shift. Nothing to do with the economy. It's just winter's coming and it's getting colder and everything slows down. So you can do the exact same play now, work really hard, grow your company, and then next spring, now you're ready to really expand everything again with more market share. All right. So when you talk about a business conversation, like this is the kind of stuff that we talk about like day in and day out, week in and week out within IEB. It's not how to do a better inspection. Like we expect, like you need to know how to do that already, right? If you don't know how to do an inspection, like, I mean, we're not the people that are going to teach you how to do an inspection. We're going to teach you how to like really.
There's a lot of resources out there for that.
There's a ton of stuff in the industry for like how to do a great inspection and how to get technically trained and all that kind of stuff, right? But here's the thing. You could be the world's best inspector. Like literally you could be the world's technically best inspector and you can be broke and have no time freedom. You're not going to be able to take your family on a vacation, even if you are the best inspector. And there's like, I've gone to conferences and like different things where I've had conversations with guys that their pride is so held up in how well they can do an inspection. And yet when I say like, hey, when's the last time you and your family took a great vacation? They're like, oh, well, they start talking around it. Like, hey, what's your retirement plan? Like, how are you going to support your family after you get done retiring? And there's no kind of conversation around it because they've got so much pride in like how well they can do a technical inspection that they don't realize like, dude, like, yes, do a great inspection. And if you want to build a great company, 100% you need to be able to deliver great service consistently over time. That's a given.
That? Pride
right?
Goeth before the fall or something like that.
Dude, like I'm telling you, man, like people have so much ego in different ways, right? And that's the thing is like, if you just like go with that and say, look, is it more important for me to have ego around this part of my business, or is it more important that I can really spend more time with my family, right? That I can hang out with my kids, that I can support, my people, that I can go on vacation, that I can hang out with my spouse without all the stress of the business, right? And if you just start thinking about it in a different way like that, you start realizing, man, like there's other things that are really important to learn. And if you don't learn those things, it's going to be very hard for you to ever like truly change your business and your life. Because even if your business continues to grow, if you haven't put focus on the other parts of it, right? If you haven't put focus on how am I going to be a leader? How am I going to scale? How am I going to learn how to read numbers at a higher level? Then what happens is, even if the business goes up and the income goes up, like the time freedom goes away. And at a certain point, I've seen people, not just in the inspection industry, in other industries that have built $10 million businesses. Like I got a guy right now that we're doing a little bit of work with. He's got a $16 million a year business. And he's just like, I'm thinking about just walking away from it, right? I mean, he's doing $16 million a year in revenue. Somebody just offered him like $4 million for his company. And he's just like, I'm thinking about walking away from it. And the sad thing is, like, this guy probably has several $100 million business that if he keeps developing it, right? But the challenge is that he hasn't poured into the right parts of himself and his people. And at a certain point, it's just like, why am I doing this, right? And people seem to think,
you get to the point you're just going as fast on that treadmill as you can, and at some point you're like, I'm getting tired, man.
Yeah. And people think if I build $1 million business that life's going to be grand, and what they don't realize is if you haven't built it right, you could have $1 million business and be broke, have no time freedom, and just have way more stress than you did running a $100,000 business, right?
Right. Well, let me ask y'all this. I know we're probably getting time to a close here because, I think we're all talkers. Yeah, that Michelle, man, you can't get a word in edgewise with her, I'll tell you. It's good. But, all right, so if I'm a Joe home inspector out there or Sue home inspector, I want to be equal. I like the stuff you're saying. I'm just trying to think the questions that would be in my mind, whether I'm single or whatever. So I like what you're saying. And I'm not going to ask you the cost because that's kind of rude, but I would say everybody has to look at something not as a cost, but as an investment. If I do this and, it pays for itself tenfold, it's not really a cost. I'll just say that. But the one thing that would be on my mind, what time commitment, and I know that same thing there, no matter what the time commitment is, if it saved you time later on, wouldn't it be worth it? I get it. Again, I'm the smoker who knows smoking's bad for me. I'm not really a smoker, but I get it. But I would have a question. So what does it look like if you join IEB, and on what level? I mean, what are there monthly meetings? Are there quarterly meetings? What does it look like?
I think that the one thing that IEB does really, really well is they are super organized. So it allows you to plan your business and your life around the events. Like, we've already put out all of our dates and all of our meeting times and everything that'll be scheduled for 2020. So, it's very easy to plan your life around IEB. Each level has calls every month. And so if you're at the builder level, you have a monthly call in the morning and a monthly call in the evening. So those 2 calls. And then if you're at the entrepreneur level, you have 2 morning calls and 2 evening calls. And if you're at the enterprise level, you have a call every week in the morning. So it's each level that you go up, you have a little bit more interaction. And then the really nice thing about it is they record everything. So let's say you're the guy who you haven't figured out how to get out of the field yet, and you can't be on that call because, I don't know, you started an inspection at 8 a.m. in the morning. That call is recorded, and it's very easily located on the internet. So you can listen to that call the next morning while you're driving to work. So you can still get some of that input, which is something I really like about IEB. Then we do a really cool call every single Wednesday at lunchtime. It's called Open Access, and people just get on there because sometimes, something comes up during the week and you got a question, and everybody gets on there, and it's really nice because you don't get to hear one person's opinion. You can hear 20 people's opinions if that's what it takes to help you solve your problem. Or
like issue. You have a problem with a competitor or something like that.
There you go. So, you can call in and you can get some feedback, and,
Right.
It's nice. You wouldn't get just my opinion or Dirk's opinion. You can hear some other people's opinions, like, hey, I've had that problem too, and this is what worked for me. Because, just because it worked for us or for Dirk, that might not be the answer for you. So it's really nice that we have that call every single Wednesday where people can come in, and it helps to build the bond between all of our members. So that's
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, those are our phone calls. And then we have 4 meetings a year.
Okay.
And our meetings are structured a little differently in the way that we get together not based on like, you're not in my part of the country, because we don't have a scarcity mentality within IEB. We get together based on the size of the business. So, if you're at the builder level, you're going to have a day together. And if you're at the entrepreneur level, you're going to have a day together. And then everybody has one day together where we bring them all together. So you have 2-day meetings 4 times a year.
Are these meetings always in Houston, or are they other places, or where? I know you're based out of Houston. Where are the meetings take place?
Currently, they
so
are in Houston.
All in Houston.
Sorry. We're looking at moving we have an event called Unite. That's one of the 4, and that's open to everybody. You don't have to be in IEB to come to that one, and we're looking at having that one in Austin this year. Austin, Texas, just somewhere, it's kind of nice to get to see another part of the country, somewhere that you haven't been before.
So you don't have to be a member to go to that?
That one's open. That's the only one in the year that's kind of open to all members. I mean, we have like the training that you came to, Preston, is called Rapid Growth Training, RGT. And the cool thing is we're actually having RGT now in multiple areas in the country. We're actually going to be in DC in November. Rob and Michelle are going to be hosting us there. And then like next month this month, we're going to be in Atlanta. So now we're starting to kind of have that training, in different locations around the country.
So,
but one of the things that we,
go ahead,
Rob. Oh,
well, go ahead. Well, I was going to ask if I wanted to know more about this, if I'm an inspector, I want to come to it. Where is, what's the website? What's the thing? I didn't mean to cut you off or whatever, but go ahead with whatever. Just how would I find out more information about it if I was interested in coming?
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to address is because people do have a question about the timing thing, right? So how much time do I need to devote to this? Because I'm already really busy, right? And what we truly tell people is like, look, we do something called the 2x2 and just say, look, twice a week for 2 hours, just say no to everything else and say yes to your business, meaning that you're not going to be looking at inspection reports, or you're not going to be focused on marketing. You're truly going to be wearing your CEO hat for 2 hours twice a week, right? And in those times is kind of when you can, even if you can't be on the live call, that's when you're listening to the calls or trainings, you're logging to your membership site, going through our back-end trainings, looking at your financials, looking at your projections. I mean, really just focusing on, working on the business and not being in the business. Because I think the challenge is so many times we're just so wrapped up in our business and we can't really see. We're like in this, kind of in the weeds essentially, and we can't see past the weeds. So when that time 2x2, like twice a week for 2 hours, it's kind of like you stand up and you can see past the weeds, and just that little bit of focus on being able to see past the weeds. When you go back into the weeds, you have much more clarity about how to operate, right? So it doesn't take a lot of time. Like that's the thing, is if you focus on the right things, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it will massively start moving your business forward. And kind of like, as Michelle said, the different levels, it kind of the time that you spend with IEB starts going up. And the reason is that as you start spending more time and the conversations are changing and you're implementing the right things, is you start getting a lot more time freedom back. But now you're starting to put that CEO hat on more often. And the more often you're wearing that hat, now you're hiring other people to do the technical part. You're hiring other people to do the growth side. You're hiring other people to do the operations. And now you're starting to learn how to succeed with and through people as a leader, right? So the more and more time that you start doing that, that's where the game changes, right? Because that's where you can really start having a good insight into like, hey, I can see the whole picture of my company. I know what decisions to make. I know, how to help people succeed. We got a program in IEB that's for high performance team building, so that you can learn how to find the right people and hire them and train them and lead them, right? So it's just changing the focus of the things that you're working on and studying. But to answer the, excuse me, to answer the question, you can go to iebcoaching.com, iebcoaching.com.
Are there any
and that's where
periods or anything, or just straight IEB coaching straight? Okay.
Yeah, just iebcoaching.com. And on our website, we've got all our upcoming events. We've got our memberships, all that kind of stuff. It's the best way to kind of get a hold of us. And I would really suggest, if somebody wants to kind of see what IEB is all about, like come to an RGT training. Like that training is designed to really give people like an inside look into who we are, what we do, how we operate. And I mean, IEB is not for everybody, right? That's the thing that I want to make really clear. If you have no interest in growing your company, like IEB is not a fit for you. And if you feel like you got everything figured out, IEB is not a fit for you, right? We are a fit for people that are growth minded, that want to grow, that want an abundance mentality, that want to learn how to collaborate, with other companies, and that truly are committed more to building a great business to fund their lives for them and their families and their people. Like those are the people that IEB is for. Like we're not for know-it-alls that are into just, just fighting over like the technical side of stuff. Like we got a culture in IEB that's really about.
I've seen that a little bit on the forums. Go ahead.
I'll rant on this for a second, right? When we first started looking at this, Greg hired me to like he put me into like 3 or 4 Facebook groups, right? He said, Dirk, you should probably get to know the industry. So I invited you to like 4 different Facebook groups. And about 2 weeks later, I left every one of those groups. And I was like, when I'm just looking what's happening here, I'm seeing people that are like berating other people, and like somebody's asking an innocent question and people are just like bombarding them and being like, that's stupid. Like why'd you ever think about, I mean, just like, and I was just like, man, like that is not cool. Right. So, I mean, that's one of the first things that we tell people in IEB is like, look, if somebody ever asks a question on an IEB and our internal Facebook page and you make them feel bad, or you like, belittle them or berate them, like we will immediately exit you out of IEB. It's not our culture. Right. If somebody asks a question. I
wasn't exited out. I do want to make that clear. I wasn't.
No.
I wasn't. No. I just got to overcome the time.
Yeah, Preston's absolutely a friend of IEB's. But no, I mean, that's the thing, man. I mean, it's not about, it's not just about like building a business. It's about like, how are you changing as a human being? Like, what's the level of your relationships and, the wealth you have, the time freedom you have, the connections you have. And it's truly about like changing people's lives. Like that's what it's about. Right. So if you are at a place in your life where you feel like, man, like, I feel like I've been doing the same thing for a long time and I'm not getting different results. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling worn out. Like maybe, just maybe the playbook that I've been running on is not the best playbook. And you're open to saying like, hey, can there be something else? Like that's who IEB is for, right? Is to say, look, have an open mind and let's do this together.
Can I add a story to it? As I know we're closing here.
Oh, absolutely, man.
You mentioned Robert Kiyosaki earlier in the interview. Big Rich Dad Poor Dad fan. In one of his books, he mentions, the story about this town that needs water supply, this village, right? And you may know this story. So what happens is they get a contract to these 2 different people. And the one person disappears. Just, you don't know what happened to him. And the other person starts going down and hauling buckets. Just brings buckets into the town, brings buckets, selling the water, whatever. Business going along fine, and then, but the other guy disappeared. You don't know what happened to him. What you find out later is this other guy goes out and he starts getting engineers, he's getting designs, he's getting things built. And then he comes back and he starts building a pipeline to get this water. Now, like I said, he had no revenue for a month and he was just doing all research and working on, he starts building this pipeline. And then pretty soon, this guy starts delivering water to the town quicker, faster, cleaner, and for more profit than the other guy. And the other guy's like, oh my gosh. He starts getting his wife and his family. They're all trying to haul buckets to compete with his pipeline, and obviously, it's like John Henry versus the moral of this story is you always have to ask yourself, are you building a pipeline or are you hauling buckets? And, I've been at different points in my life, and I am on the marketing side right now where I'm hauling buckets, and I got to build a pipeline. I mean, this is just all there is to it. So that was all.
Really, one of the things is you have to decide, are you serving your business or is your business serving you?
Right. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys. What's the website and the phone number one more time? Or maybe not phone number, but how can they find out more about you guys for anybody listening?
Yeah, just Google Inspector Empire Builder or go to iebcoaching.com, iebcoaching.com.
Awesome. Last question. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Man, I think we could probably have a conversation for days on end.
We could probably.
So much, so.
But I know.
No, man. Yeah, Preston, I appreciate it so much, man. Thank you so much for having us on. We appreciate you, and yeah, thanks for the conversation. But no, I think, you know, there's so much more we can talk about. So I don't know that we can cover anything more today.
Awesome. Let me hit the stop record, and thank you guys very much.